This program is brought to you by Globus.
Hello, beautiful people, and thank you for taking this rendezvous of today on a Global Insight as we continue to analyze the stakes affecting the global world. And today we want to look again at the rhetorics of war, this time around joining it with the philosophy of mediation as we take focus on what is happening in the Middle East crisis, looking at the involvement of the United States of America, and of course, with this statement, a peace crusader on war spree, from a negotiation table to missile exchanges. That's the current status quo after Israel and the United States of America launched an onslaught on Iran. Tehran responded with a more violent defense, paralyzing Gulf states harboring U.S. military bases and turning the Middle East into a peril of war. On the 8th day of this massive air and missile campaign, supposed peace crusader, the U.S. President Donald Trump and his mission accomplished, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, struck targets from Tehran's political heart to suspected nuclear and military sites, operations openly described in Washington and Tel Aviv as a decisive blow against the Iranian regime. But the question stands, how yielding is their plan? Iran answers with hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles, not just at Israel and USA bases, but at ports, airports, and all infrastructure across the Gulf, closing the Strait of Hormuz and pushing the region and, of course, global markets into a dangerous spiral, according to reports. Iran's post-1979 era has been systemic and strategic. Both sides have, however, recorded casualties, including the killing of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. Diplomatic and strategic relations are strained at this moment. Gulf countries are trapped between U.S. pressure to host and support operations and Iran's fierce retaliation. Even European allies feel the weight of U.S. demands, raising fundamental questions about sovereignty inside NATO alliance itself, according to reports. The blasphemy. The United States still claims the mantle of world peace or peace and global peace crusader, while in the last few years helping launch regime change style strikes on Iran, backing operations many Latin Americans denounce as the effective kidnapping of Venezuela's elected president, and struggling for any credible endgame to the Ukraine war. It has heavily armed and financed. So we're going to ask this question among others. Can diplomacy thrive over drones? How authentic is this self-image as a guarantor of peace and international law when Washington opens new fronts, threatens more sanctions and secondary sanctions, and talks openly about choosing Iran's next leadership? How do we explain, therefore, the rhetoric of U.S. foreign policy using Iran as a case study in this 21st century, among other examples? Or are we witnessing a superpower on a war spree using peace language to justify permanent intervention? Ladies and gentlemen, these questions and more we are going to decode with a panel of experts on this edition of Global Insight proposed to you by Globers as we continue to examine the events happening in Middle East, particularly between Israel, USA, and Iran, and of course, how this is affecting not just the Middle East countries, but the global world, affecting also the philosophy of globalization, international cooperation, and of course, bringing us again to the table to understanding the rhetorics of war and mediation. I will join you right after this as we uncover the panel this day. Welcome back. Without much ado, let's take you now to Germany and welcome Halle Schlenger, International Spokesperson, Schiller Institute. Welcome to this very insightful program of Global Insight this day, dear Halle.
Well, thank you very much. This is an incredible moment in history, probably a turning point in the modern period. And the outcome is still somewhat in doubt, but one thing that's not in doubt is that the leadership of the U.S. is in a fantasy world right now if they think this is going to be a short war and a quick victory.
And of course, it is actually a decisive moment for the global world. To the United States of America, let's welcome Dr. Ashil Eki, Corporate Export CEO, Washington Valuation Group. A pleasure having you on this very timely topic, which focuses on the Middle East, and we cannot actually undermine the economic ramifications of what is happening in the Middle East.
Thank you, Clarice, for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here today with this phenomenal panel. I'm glad to meet again some of our preferred panelists, and so I'm going to say hello to your audience out there, and I hope they're going to love this debate because we have a lot to share with them, and the topic is of the utmost importance right now. So thank you for the invitation.
You're most welcome, and we stay in the United States, welcoming Steve Gill, political commentator who doubles as ex-advisor Bush and Clinton administrations. It's our pleasure having you this day, Steve.
Thank you for having me. And like Eku, I'll say, what a great panel. You always assemble a first-rate team that has different viewpoints. Even though Eku's always wrong, I never can agree with him, but it's always good to see my friend.
Absolutely. The goal is to exchange our views and, of course, learn from each other and provide a clear and better horizon for the population and different or distinct audience as they continue to watch world event. Let's now welcome Dr. Enrique Refollo, who is a journalist and, of course, a political scientist. He's from Spain, and it is very timely because Spain happens to be one of the countries, of course, actually, having already some warnings from the supposed peace crusader.
Thanks a lot for your invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with some familiar faces and with some new colleagues. So let's go.
Indeed, it is imperative, when we share knowledge, we learn and then we grow and see if we should go by the conclusion that we need the systematic or probably diplomacy over a use of drones. And where is the human fabric in all of these that is happening with the situation in the Middle East, being a case study for this day? And to India, let's acknowledge the presence of Professor Jagdish Khatri, a global analyst who doubles as author and speaker. A pleasure having you, Professor Jagdish.
Hello, namaskar from India. Thank you very much, madam, for this invitation. It's a proud privilege to join such an elite panel on this very, very important issue that is shaping our history and the future. Thank you.
Absolutely, shaping history and the future. Just like we have always been doing, it is imperative to contextualize a topic for discussion before actually looking at the foreign policy of the United States, which has always presented the country as the world pleaser. We want to also look at the preamble of our discussion this day, having, a specific interpretation of the events in the Middle East from a personal perspective before we go into our problematic or the questions we raised in our introduction. I will kick off with you, Halet Shlanger. Ending 2028, February 2026 to March 2026, we see the onslaught this time around to U.S., Israel, and of course on Iran, but then a fierce retaliation. So what are your primary explanation or interpretations of the events happening in the Middle East from the negotiation table now to exchange of missiles?
Well, let me start with the bad news for the world, which is that if you're going to have negotiations, you can't use the negotiations as an excuse to then launch an attack.
Yeah.
And we've seen this now twice from the United States in June and then again last month. We're in the middle of negotiations, including negotiations where they said there was some headway. And what do we see? That's used as the excuse to launch the attack. Now think about the effect of that, and you're talking about internationally. Ukraine. How could Putin continue these negotiations if the negotiations serve as a point of escalation? So that's the first point I would start with. The second one, I had said at the beginning of the second Trump administration that I would be very delighted if he were a candidate for peace and if he were committed to negotiation, even if it's from a position of strength, but to recognize that this is not the same world that existed in his first term. We now have a new alignment occurring internationally from the global south, the alliance with Russia, with China, with India. It's no longer an American-dominated world or a British and American-dominated world. And what we're seeing is the fact that the advisors around President Trump, and probably Trump himself still think that American military strength and economic strength give them the right to dictate events in the world. And what we're seeing is that strength has limits. You can destroy Iran if you want with weapons, but you're not going to break the spirit of the Iranian people. And I think that there's a profound miscalculation, whether it's Rubio, whether it's the Treasury Secretary who said economic statecraft is carrying out sanctions that destroy a country. What we're seeing is that there still are international laws. And the fact that we don't have a unipolar order, or a so-called rules-based order, as Blinken used to call it, doesn't mean there are no rules anymore. There still are rules of international conduct, the United Nations Charter, and so on. And unfortunately, it appears as though the advisors of President Trump don't recognize that. Now, finally, final point to make, the US military went into this with somewhat hesitancy, with resistance, knowing that this would not be a slam dunk, just as in fact Iraq, Afghanistan were not slam dunks. The attacks on Libya destroyed that country. And so the question is, will the military step up and say to the president, this must stop before it escalates? So those are my opening comments.
Thank you so much, Halia. Very imperative to ask questions that do matter during this very decisive moment in the sphere of diplomacy, geopolitics, and even international relations. Can we thrive in the multipolar world when interest, of course, and of course the quest for fame and resources are pushing us into some sort of, clashes or war? That's why in the preamble we defined the Middle East as a period of war. In the same perspective, let's get to you, Steve Gill, a political commentator, and of course, very implanted in the dynamics of the United States policy and its role in the Middle East. We know, as we noted from 1979, the story changed between Iran, Israel, and the United States of America. And today in 2026, we are seeing some sort of escalation as a result of failure to find a lasting solution on the negotiation table. So what are your perspectives primarily regarding the launch of this onslaught on Iran that led to a fierce retaliation? And even on the 8th day, as we're talking, we are still seeing the aftermath or the consequences of such a decision.
Yeah, I think first of all, it is absolutely clear from the way that Iran has retaliated against their neighbors, against their innocent targets, so whether it's hotels, whether it's civilian airports. First priority of the Trump administration was to make sure that Iran did not get nuclear weapons. And I think as we're seeing the way that they're using traditional weapons, there's no doubt that they would use nuclear weapons either as global blackmail or to actually target and use them against their neighbors, the same way they're using their ballistic and traditional weapons. So I think everybody in the region, if not in the world, agrees that keeping Iran from getting nuclear weapons should be a top priority. And you don't develop peaceful nuclear power by burying your facilities and development operations hundreds and hundreds of meters below rock mountains. If they were developing peaceful nuclear power, they wouldn't do it that way. And I think even NATO and others acknowledge that they have been continuing to pursue that during the negotiations since 1979, and as they kind of come up to higher priority and then lower. The other priority that the Trump administration emphasized was to deny their continued development of ballistic missiles, to allow their reach of attacks to go beyond their closest neighbors to Europe and even perhaps to the US. And third, they have funded terrorism around the world, killing Americans, killing others. The Khobar Towers, a decade or so ago, they have killed innocent people, funded the death of innocent people, and stopping their terrorist funding has been a key part. And you're seeing Lebanon step up against Hezbollah now in an official position to start to deal with the terrorists within their borders that have been funded by Iran. So I think that the reasons that this was done by the U.S. are what most people in the world would agree to. Now the question is, how long will it last? We have seen people protesting around the world in the wake of snatching Maduro and waving signs claiming "Stop the war, bring our troops home." That war lasted 2 hours. This one will actually last much longer. The Trump administration is expecting, another 4, perhaps 6 weeks. But the military capacity of Iran has been, seriously degraded. I think they had about 30 naval ships, most of which are now at the bottom of the ocean. They have no air power that can continue to protect their skies. Their number of munitions to fire at their neighbors, again, including peaceful targets like airports in Dubai, hotels and other civilian targets, has been seriously degraded. So the airstrikes will continue to weaken Iran. The question is, and I think we'll talk more about that throughout the time here, how do you get the people of Iran freed from this oppressive regime that has held them by the throat for so long, killing tens of thousands of innocent civilians in just the last few weeks? Can you, with placards and protests and chants, defeat the armed police and the armed military assets that Iran has on the ground? We may see the Kurds come in, we may see other operations, but it's not easy once you move from airstrikes to boots on the ground. And I think that's where the real challenge, still remains over the next several weeks.
Okay. And of course, we are going to look into that in total. Let me come to you, Dr. Enrique. I think from Steve's, statement, we can deduce that it is actually given reason for the United States to join Israel in the onslaught on Iran. So let's try to have your own holistic analysis of this attack and see, is it probably a justified act, or probably it's some sort of a quest for control and fame, as has always been the case in most geopolitical fights.
Well, talking on the Spanish situation, I think we have to make some remarks, because in the previous days, our president made a statement, but it's only a statement, not reality.
Yeah.
We are accustomed to the situation in which president lies, and he is lying all the time. There is one very important issue in the Spanish question, in the Spanish politics. Left-wingers are so pro-Palestine, and right-wingers are so pro-Israelis. So for government, it's very interesting to make government is left-winger, it's a socialist party. So it's some kind of activate their own audience, their own people, like, yes, we are defending Palestine, we are defending Gaza. Yeah. Now we are defending pro-peace stance on Iran and blah, blah, blah. We are not going to allow the warplanes from USA in the American bases in the south of Spain, because we are opposed on the war against Iran, blah, blah, blah. But really, the Spanish army is also the Spanish armed forces are participating in this European coalition for doing nobody knows which is the task. But one day, President said, we are not going to participate, we are not allowing that American air forces will use our southern bases. Okay, but they continue using the bases. And Spanish Navy ordered the sending of one of our best frigates bonding to Cyprus with the French fleet, with the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle. So what is our task? Making countermeasures against Iranian missiles, protecting British bases in the vicinity of a European country as Cyprus. Somebody knows in Europe that Cyprus is divided in three parts: the Turkish northern side, the Republic of Cyprus, and the British bases. And they are three types of a country. But in the case of Spain, as I told you, you have to remind the president always says something and makes the opposite. With the Palestinian case, with the Iranian case, with a new no to war movement, it's only for their own audience, for their own voters. We are close to elections next year as maximum, so he needs to mobilize their own people and to create the feeling that president is so important. And when, for example, in media, in mainstream media from USA or from other European countries, president appear like President Sanchez, the president of peace. This is wonderful for their own audience, but he will participate in the war with other European powers. If USA reclaim that NATO members in Europe, you have to participate with me in the war against Iran. Okay, let's go, everybody. And no opposition, but one thing is the statement, one thing is the reality. In this case, they create one reality in media, in mainstream media, but the real reality on the ground is that President Sanchez is always participating in these American, British, NATO, European initiatives. For example, in the case of Ukrainian war, many people remember that, yes, Sanchez now is anti-war president, but he participated always in the initiative of NATO in the Ukrainian-Russian case. So he is also going to participate, but he needs this spectacle for their own audience.
Thank you, Dr. Enrique, for the highlights. And of course, on our topic, I come to you, Dr. Ashil Eki, as you present your holistic approach of the events happening in the Middle East, the position of Israel, USA, and Iran in its retaliation move.
I just love the title of this debate, right? So the title, Peace Crusader on War Spree,
Sure.
right? What a contradiction. It captures the central contradiction of US policy in the Middle East, right? So Washington presents itself as a mediator and protector of a rule-based order, but its wars and military buildups have been major drivers of instability from Iraq and Libya to Gaza and now Iran. Mm-hmm. The United States is not a neutral firefighter. It has often acted as the arsonist. It topples regimes, arms allies without conditions, and then calls the resulting chaos a security problem that justifies new interventions. Each new crisis produces more bases, more arms, cells, and more political dependence on Washington. Iraq and Libya were both sold as wars for democracy and protection of civilians. Both ended in state collapse, militias, and terrorism spilling across borders. In Gaza, the US calls for de-escalation while giving Israel massive military and diplomatic backing, turning a local war into a regional fire touching Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran. The latest US military buildup around Iran, carriers, jets, and strikes, again, comes packaged as deterrence, but in practice widens the war zone, and raises the risk of a bigger regional conflict. For Africa and the wider global South, this is not just a Middle Eastern story. It is a warning. The same language, counterterrorism, humanitarian intervention, stability operations, has already been used to justify interventions and bases on African soils. Libya's destruction destabilized the entire Sahel. Palestine shows how easily the rights of a people are ignored when they obstruct a powerful ally's agenda. So a Pan-African vision says we must not outsource our security and our definition of peace to powers whose dominance depends on our fragmentation. Africans and Arabs share the same strategic interest, building regional security and economic systems that reduce dependence on foreign armies and foreign narratives. True peace will not come from a crusader on a war spree. It must be built by the people who refuse to remain permanent battlefields. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Ashil Eki. Of course, we are going to understand today the rhetorics of our topic, which is very important. Like we said, the rhetorics of war and mediation, and who has the power to stand as the peace crusader to solving especially issues that concern sovereign nations. In the same perspective, we come to you, Professor Jagdish Khatri. India is not left out, and its position has been very problematic lately. Some pundits have actually underlined that India is dancing to the music being played by the United States and Israel. Let's use this statement to get your own understanding or interpretation of the Israel-USA onslaught on Iran. Do you think it was a justified action at this juncture? Your mic is muted, please, Professor Jagdish. Hello, Professor.
Oh, you mute it again.
Please, your mic is muted.
So-
We can't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, there's some technical glitches in my PC, and I'm trying
All
from
good now. All
my
good now.
mobile. Yeah. We are all witness to an era where hegemony is being established at the cost of harmony and at the cost of humanity. And the way the rationale behind this aggression is being changed daily from one reason to another in daily speeches, it shows that more than the decision by two nations, it was a hasty decision by two individuals at the helm of affairs. One who thinks himself to be the center of universe, and another who takes sadistic pleasure in genocidal movements. So that is what is happening now. How long the world can be silent or selective about the innocent people being killed? What is the threshold limit? How many thousands more should die before we start condemning what is wrong? This is the question that we must ask ourselves. And also, those bystanders who are just calculating their profit and loss in this situation, they will also have to answer to the history. See, even before the ink has dried on the document of Board of Peace, the war has started. So what was Board of Peace meant for? And what was the rationale of asking for $1 billion from each participant, whether for the peace or funding this war?
Exactly.
These are very inconvenient questions, but they must be asked at some place. We can't be just selective, that we cry for the innocent people being killed in some other neighboring state, but do not say a word where young girls, students from 4 years to 10 years are killed in hundreds. So we are at a very turning point of history, and I'm sure one day the world will realize what is good and what is not in the interest of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we just concluded the first part of this discussion with the holistic interpretation. Then coming back to you, Haile Schrenger, when you listen to the voices of officials and even the leaders of USA and Israel, you will get one thing: they are preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, and of course they also highlighted the fact that Iran's alignment with Hezbollah and other groups, which they actually highlighted, pose an existential danger or threat to Israel at this juncture. And now, does this alone justify the attack which Iran suffered on the 28th of February that led to the the killing of its supreme leader, and some sorts of questions are also being posed when you look at countries that have nuclear weapons, about 9, but Iran has not been cited. So what do you think are those reasons, the reasons not known to the public, which some critical analysis can bring us into understanding the reason behind the flare in the Middle East?
Well, let me start by saying something that people who don't know me may not know,
Yeah, okay.
which is that when President Trump first came in, I was very hopeful that he would be a candidate of peace.
Absolutely.
And I saw the people who opposed him in the Bush networks in the Republican Party and the Clinton-Obama networks in the Democratic Party actually were very happy with wars and coups and regime changes. And I was hopeful that President Trump would go in a different direction. But as Steve Gill went through the reasons for the war, and he accurately stated what the State Department and Secretary of War Hegseth and Donald Trump said, there are problems with that. First of all, there's disagreement in U.S. experts as to whether or not Iran is building a nuclear bomb. And if they are, President Trump said we obliterated it in the June attacks. Secondly, this question of the Iran sponsorship of terrorism. There's a saying, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Why did Hezbollah get formed in the first place? Because Ariel Sharon went into the Palestinian camps and slaughtered people in the 1980s. So there's a longer history here. These things don't start just one day. And if you ignore the history, you end up with the kind of endless wars such as we've been in Iraq, Afghanistan, the destruction of the civil society in Libya, and so on. And the third point was, the killing of innocent people. This is what the Israelis are saying happened. They said 35,000 Iranians were killed. I don't know how many were. I'm not sure. But one of the things I do know is that Benjamin Netanyahu is not a trustworthy source. Netanyahu admitted that he's had a 40-year dream of destroying Iran. Netanyahu has committed atrocities against the Palestinians in Gaza. And the idea of a just world, a multipolar world, a world of harmony, is that you actually have dialogue and discussion, that you don't have the idea of might makes right. And unfortunately, when President Trump was talking in the build-up to the Iran war, after he went into Venezuela and kidnapped the president, he said, I don't do international law. Now, as I said, it's one thing to reject the kind of so-called international law that exists with this idea of a unipolar order or a so-called rules-based order where the rules are made by the powerful and everyone else is forced to submit. And I don't believe that world exists anymore. I think the global South is emerging in opposition to that. We just saw one of the largest countries in the global South, Indonesia, pull out of the Board of Peace because of what's happening in the war against Iran. But I think it's mistaken to assume that if you have the military might, you have the right to go in and attack a country, wipe out its government completely, and then say, now we can have peace. So I think there are some things that are being done by the Trump administration that not only go against international law, but go against everything he campaigned on. And as someone who has a lot of friends in the MAGA movement, I can tell you that Trump's base is splitting over this. They see this not as an America first policy, but as an Israel first policy. And so I think these are considerations that have to be brought in. And I'm not sure how you get out of this thing very quickly, but there has to be an exit strategy, which is not the destruction, the absolute destruction of Iran, because that's not going to occur. And it could lead to years of civil war in Iran and also terrorism. I'm reminded of what happened when President Trump was correctly trying to work with Kim Jong-un of North Korea to end the nuclear program there. And what happened was John Bolton said to Kim that, remember what happened to Gaddafi. In other words, if you don't have nuclear weapons, you become a target. That's why some of these countries want nuclear weapons. If you want to end nuclear proliferation, you don't assert your authority to crush someone to encourage them to develop nuclear weapons. So I think there are a lot of ambiguities here that are not entirely honest from the Trump administration. And I don't agree that all of the world wants Iran destroyed and their weapons programs destroyed. I think there are a lot of countries that are hoping there can be a peaceful settlement, but are fearful that the United States is not interested in an honest dialogue, as proven by the fact that in the midst of negotiations, you launch a war.
Twice.
Indeed, lots of ambiguities as we continue to analyze. I come back to you, Steve, quite interested. You highlighted the key point that prompted the President of the United States of America to join the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in launching the attack on Iran. And if we want to go back memory lane, looking at history, taking Libya, the North African nation, as an example, with when the actually weaponize the challenges of the vulnerable people, which you highlighted as being one of the reasons why Trump actually joined Israel into Iran. Till date, we are still looking at a shattered Libya. So let's try to understand from your own standpoint, this, is it just about some sort of blasphemy to ensure some sort of global governance, dominance in the world's affair? Or practically, do you think that this foreign policy stance, which has been, taken to another dimension by the Trump administration, attracting greater criticisms even from America, is a justified reason as to probably attacking a sovereign nation?
Well, first of all, let me clarify. I did not say or indicate that I think the whole world is in agreement that Iran should be destroyed. I think everybody is or should be agreed they should not get nuclear weapons, because as they've shown their use of traditional weapons against their neighbors, they will use them.
What about those countries that already have nuclear weapons?
Yeah, nobody's used them except the U.S. in World War II. And again, you have countries that have that capacity that don't constantly threaten to wipe out their neighbor. If you've got a next door neighbor who for years, decades in this case, promise and swear that they will kill every member of your family and burn down your house, you have an obligation for self-defense to prevent that from happening. And I think the nations around the world should make sure that a psychopath doesn't get a weapon to be able to accomplish the absolute wiping out of Israel.
What about Netanyahu?
He hasn't used nuclear weapons against
Israel is
Iran.
not a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
And Israel has constantly acted in a defensive capacity. They're not firing, even in this case, they've not fired nuclear weapons at Iran. I do want to point out, though, that you have to deal with these nations around the world on an individual basis. I don't think you can just, blanket everything. Libya, I would agree with you guys. We have a bad tradition in the U.S. of regime change that results in replacing a bad guy with a worse guy. I think that was the case in Libya. I think that's a good argument of what's happened in Syria as well. Bashar al-Assad was not as bad as what has happened worse. So I think that, again, you have to look on a case-by-case basis. In Venezuela, Maduro has been removed. The vice president has taken power. They are moving towards free and fair elections. That should be counted as a model for the kind of success we would want, although we don't know who ends up eventually in power there. But I think you can't just look and say, okay, whenever you have regime change, it always works out badly. unfortunately, so often it does. But I think the intent should be to try and, make sure that you replace really bad guys with at least less worse guys.
But why is that the responsibility of the United States?
Who else in the world can do it? I mean, if you've got someone that is literally committing genocide, without the U.S., Hitler would have continued to go across Europe and kill millions and millions until the U.S. stepped in. It was not possible.
Russia.
Who else can do it?
I think, yes, I think, Dr. Ashil
Right.
Eki, just to continue in the same perspective, we asked in the preamble if actually drones should replace diplomacy in solving such a crisis, and that is why we want to. I think Steve's statement has brought us to asking the question and answering it. Where is the place of diplomacy or systematic approaches that will not actually probably result to maybe exchange of drones if the interest of Iranians should be the primary reason as to why this onslaught is happening at this juncture, with already some sort of greater ramifications being felt even by Gulf countries and others?
Well, the fact of the matter is the Trump administration doesn't want diplomacy. They already had preconceived plan. Dr. Schlanger talked about Netanyahu having a 40-year dream of destroying Iran. So they're not interested in diplomacy. They asked Iran to negotiate, to go to negotiation table twice. And that's I wanted to point out. So the first war, the 12-day war, happened while they were negotiating, and it just happened again the second time. So how can we trust Trump and Netanyahu with diplomacy? They don't want diplomacy. That's clear. So Iran has the right to defend itself when they are attacked, just like Israel, just like any other country in the world. They have the right to defend themselves. They haven't attacked anybody. Iran has not attacked any country in years, in years, in years. They haven't. All they said is they have to protect, they have to defend their civilization. And we know the Ayatollah who was killed had a fatwa against producing nuclear weapons. It's known everywhere. Within Iran, it's an issue. Some extremists wanted to have nuclear weapons like North Korea to deter what is happening today. But the Ayatollah stayed firm. He said, no, he's not going to allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. So what are we talking about, Steve? There is no need for nuclear weapons in Iran. They don't want nuclear weapons. If they wanted it, they would have had it a long time ago. They would have made it long. They didn't know how to build it. They have the technology, they have everything. But they deliberately decided not to have nuclear weapons. So what is the excuse today? Zero excuse. So we are on one side having, United States and Israel that just want to dominate the region. And to do that, they have to destroy every other country that has any capacity whatsoever to protect itself. That's the idea. That's the goal. Israel wants to dominate the Middle East and expand. It's just like the ambassador of the U.S. to Israel said, they can take the whole territory of the Middle East for themselves because God said so. That is insane. That is crazy. And this morning I was reading the news and I found out this number, 365,000. 365,000. Do you know what number that is? The number of missiles that Iran currently has. And according to the president who put that information out, if they use 150 to 200 missiles a day, this war could go on for 4 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. They can sustain that level of war. So this is the current status, not even counting what they're going to be making in the process. As they deplete their inventory, they're going to be making more. So they have enough missiles of all types to last just with the stock they have today for 4 to 5 years. That's the president of Iran that stated that today. So all this talk about, we're going to Iran, we're going to destroy them, it's bullshit. Really, I'm sorry to say that, but it's just bull. Okay, so we have to understand that Iran is not Venezuela. Israel is not Iraq. It's just a different whole level. And I'm not sure Trump knows what he's getting himself into. This can last his life. If they want to pursue this war, he could be dead before this war is ended. And they tried it in Afghanistan. Afghanistan that has practically nothing, and 20 years later they had to run away, and then come back later to beg to use the Bagram airport or base, the Bagram base in Kabul, which they said no to. So Trump doesn't know what he's doing. He's trying to, he thinks that what is in his head is going to happen, just like what happened in Venezuela. It's fantasy. This is Iran. So I don't think they're interested in diplomacy, to answer your question, Clarice. Diplomacy is the last of their concern. They're not interested. And Iran doesn't want to pursue nuclear weapon. That is a fact. The IAEA said that. All the observers said that. Many, military people have said Iran doesn't want. They have a fatwa. They can't go over that fatwa unless the Ayatollah, changes his mind, which he did not. And he put himself on arm's way. He died for his country because he could have easily, go hide on, in the bunker anywhere to prevent, the attack or to prevent people from killing him. But he refused. He stayed the course. He stayed there. He wants to die for his country, and he did. Now he's a martyr. And how, in the middle of holy the current what do they call it? I don't remember the current situation where Muslim Karim, François Karim. How do you call it in English?
The Ramadan, yeah.
Ramadan, right? In the heart of Ramadan, they decide to kill the Pope of the Shia faith. Can you believe that one day somebody decides to bomb Vatican and kill the Pope? All Christians, Steve here is going to be crazy. You're going to go insane. Why would you kill the Pope? Why would you kill the Pope of Iran, of the Shia faith? Why? The guy have done what you want him to do. He said he doesn't want nuclear weapons in his country. He created a proclamation. He signed a fatwa in preventing that. Why are you still using that excuse? It doesn't make sense.
Indeed, the stakes are high, of course, in the Middle East, and of course, understanding the raison d'être behind the attacks is what we are seeking to see in this, discussion, to be able to chart the way forward for a sustainable, peace or solution that will de-escalate the tension in the Middle East and probably lead to a smooth economic functioning of economic activities. And from what has been said so far with you, Dr. Enrique, while talking earlier on, dear Hali highlighted the place of the rules-based order, and we know that to be able to solve some of these ambiguities, especially in the Middle East, if we want to bring the aspect of international law, or probably respect the rules-based orders, which according to some pundits, it's no longer in existence, or its relevance is depleted. So how can we use all of these to clear off the ambiguity surrounding the attacks between Israel, USA on Iran under the disguise of probably not wanting Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon, or probably to bring a new life to Iranians?
I think we have to keep in mind one event in the USA back in 200 years ago. The episode of Indian Removal Act, the Trail of Tears, by which the American government decided that we have to make a massive displacement of Indians, of Native American people from the east to the west, to the far in the west, but later the border advanced over them. So it was a ethnic cleansing in the first step, in the first stage of forced displacement, and later more and more and more. So this episode in the history of USA I mention now because this mentality continues in the government of Washington and in Tel Aviv too. The mentality that we are the cowboys, we are the civilization, and the others are the Indians in the meaning of Native Americans. They are the savage people. We are the civilization. We are the cowboys. We are the best. We are the good ones in this new Western film. So they have no rights. They have no voice. We cannot make some diplomacy with some kind of savage people. We are the civilizers. They are the savage. So Iranians, Palestinians, so other, they are not in the same level than us. They are below us. They are not like people. They are savage. They are monsters. So if they are not like us, we can make force displacement, new ethnic cleansing, just like we saw in Gaza, in Gaza Strip, or like when State of Israel ordered to Lebanese people have to evacuate the region from the border to River Litani, for example. Or we have to plan what to do with Palestinian people from Gaza Strip. They cannot continue living there. No, we have to make a new Indian Removal Act in order to take these people out from their own land. So the problem is that this mentality is living still in Washington and also in Tel Aviv. The most important point, I think, is who is the inspirator of these new ideas, if it's in USA or if this Zionist plague from other centers who are trying to push the same idea that we are the cowboys, we are the civilization, and the others are simply savage. So we can take these people to other place. We cannot negotiate with this because they are not people. They are savage. They are terrible. They are crazy. They are dictators. They are not democrats, and so on and so on. So this is a key important issue in the international world, because if the still self-perceived first global power as USA doesn't consider the other peoples, the other countries as an actor, as an equal actor, it doesn't matter if less or more powerful, but just like other countries, we are a country, we are a state, you are another, okay, let's make some diplomacy, some arrangement. No, we are the cowboys, the rest are the Indians, so we can kill them, we can displace them. They are not people like us. The only people in the world, it's only we the people, we, not the rest. So it's again this mentality who is pushing especially against the same American people, the same people from USA, because, okay, we are pushing a politics against the rest of the world. So who is going to behold the global hegemony from USA under these conditions? It's like the cowboys are a few and they want to take over the world, and the rest are these Indians in this mentality of like a Western film. And in this context, what was the peacemaker? A gun in order to kill this savage and to take the field, the lands of them. So it's absolutely terrible repetition of history, because we are 200 years later. We are living in different conditions. We lived a lot of genocides during the previous century. So why nobody is thinking with their own head, or what is in the heads of this establishment in Washington? They are considering themselves like the new civilized world, civilized government. We can make everything we want with the rest. And especially one final issue, in the case of the relation between USA government and European governments. Our governments in Europe are like servants to Washington, not like partners in equal level. They are like terrible submissive peasants for this American government. So what's the message to the rest of the world? It doesn't matter if you are in the Western world or in Global South. The center, the American government, will treat you in the same bad way because they are the only one, the chosen ones, and simply the rest.
And that's where the problematic lies. And if we can use the words of Donald Trump, he said there will be no peace if there is what he called unconditional surrender. And we want to come back to you, Professor Jagdish, and looking at the human fabric of this. When this attack started, we saw all girls school that was attacked which recorded a whole lot of casualties. So we want to look at this, still understanding the rhetorics or the ambiguities in the reasons given by the USA and Israel for launching an attack which Iran retaliated fiercely, and they have been calling on Iranians to rally for them to ensure that they have a new leader that will meet their aspirations. Let's try to look at how we somehow, because of the ambiguity of the war, we tend to neglect the human fabric of the event, and every day we see exchange of missiles and also casualties recorded. If by the end of this, the people they are claiming to protect, all of them die, what will become of the situation, and what message can the world interpret from the events in the Middle East and even elsewhere across the world?
Yeah. Actually, it is said that more the things change, more they remain the same. And that is true, that we have been seeing since successive US presidents have always talked about democracy, liberation of other countries, people, and all that. But what has happened is, you see the case of Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Gaza, everywhere, whatever the propaganda was there was not found to be true in the later stages. There were no weapons of mass destruction or chemical weapons or anything. And even it is, there are reports that Ayatollah Khamenei was personally against Iran producing nuclear weapons, and he had even issued a fatwa against the nuclear weapon development as a no-go area for Iran. And even Oman, which was acting as a mediator in the negotiations, they have said that negotiations were almost successful and to be announced. And but that would not have served the purposes of perhaps Israel. So that's why we have all the rationale being given, daily changing, and Netanyahu saying he was waiting for this since last 40 years to become a regional hegemon by destroying Iran. So, I mean, if it is said that those who do not learn from history are condemned to repeat it. And that is what we are seeing, that we must learn, take learnings from all previous experiences and try to find truth and harmony at the world stage. That is important, and that should be our criteria of measuring success, not by invading others or killing their infrastructure or people. That should be the case.
Indeed, unfortunately, we are seeing a different scenario, and the motive, according to some pundits, lies in what they define as oil hegemony, military industrial profits, and even proxy wars. Will bring us again to understanding better that the proponents of war, they'll always say that it is a political tool. Let's use all of these aspects with you, Halet Shranga, to understand why it is imperative to be more critical, to note that it's just all about maybe having a strong military prowess, oil hegemony in the world, and also some sort of alignment as far as proxy wars is concerned, as we use these to understand again the tactics of war, and how it these points will make it very difficult to maybe get the end results of actually bringing the new life in court that is usually preaching the foreign policies of certain nations that will define themselves as global peace crusaders or even world peace.
Well, let me start by saying that I think Dr. Rifolio is absolutely right to look to history for examples. And that one of the problems that exists among policymakers is they have a short memory. They remember the last bad thing done to them. And in that sense, you know, what triggered the reaction in Israel that led to the slaughter in Gaza? It was the October 7th attack. But there were many, many years before that of fighting, including persecution of Palestinians. And you can't look at the situation after October 7th and say that everything was dependent on what happened on October 7th. Now, I'm bringing that up because we actually have a chance right now in the world to move beyond where we've been for the last 500 years of colonialism and neocolonialism. Much of the world is saying now, the global south is saying, we deserve the benefits of sovereign nations that have been denied us for the last 500 years as colonies, especially of European countries. And that we were not able to use our own resources to develop our countries. Now we want that. And that brings us to what you were saying, Clarice, about oil. One of the interesting things to look at, and this is not off topic, why is it that we're still having this problem with Russia and Ukraine? This goes back to the end of the middle of the 19th century. The British fear that if Russia and Europe ever got together, the British Empire would be over. And therefore, their policy from the time of the Crimean War through the World War II was to make sure that Russia and Western Europe was never in an alliance. Because with the raw material wealth of Russia and the science and technology of Western Europe, it would outstrip the ability of the British Navy to control trade and finance. Now, that's an important thing to recognize when you look at what happened after World War II. The British continued to try to maintain an empire. Initially, the United States opposed that. Eisenhower turned the British back, along with the Israelis and the French, into Sinai in defense of Egypt's sovereignty. But after the death of Kennedy, we've had a creep in the United States toward adoption of the idea of a British geopolitical strategy of breaking nations apart, breaking up alliances in order to maintain a unipolar order. And that's what's changing now. That's It's not easy to make that kind of change, especially if you've been number one for a while. And think about how the British feel now, where their government is in chaos over the Epstein affair, over the corruption that's come out around that. So the question then is, how do you achieve peaceful solutions? And it means you have to go beyond the immediate past. And this is why I want to point to something that I think would be very important for the West to realize. The idea of the Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, that you have to have an agreement to put aside the past wrongs, not to forget them, but to move toward a recognition that all people have legitimate interests. They may be different than yours, but that doesn't mean you go to war over them. What we go to war over is mostly raw materials and money. And human lives are expendable in that. Well, I don't think that's right. And I think that most of the world rejects that outlook. And so when President Trump says, I don't do international law, I do what my own moral basis tells me. Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've just seen that his moral basis does not take into consideration the fact that U.S. weapons and U.S. money allowed the Israeli government to kill thousands of children of Palestine, and we didn't speak out against it. And so we're having a clash between two essential outlooks. The idea of a harmony of interests that may be hard to negotiate and come up with a solution, but is preferable to the unleashing of the instruments of war. And I think that's if there's anything to come from this discussion, the question is not who hit each other last. It's like two children on a schoolyard. You have to get beyond that. And unfortunately, in the West, we do not have leaders who are honest in their agreement that we have to overcome the doctrines that led us to these centuries of colonial exploitation. So we're in a transition period, and it's a rough transition period. But we're not going to get out of it if we keep going back to, they did this to us, so we have the right to do this back to them. Mm-hmm. There's got to be a shift in thinking that all nations have legitimate security demands. We may not always agree, but let's negotiate. Let's talk about it. And I think that's the lesson from what we're seeing now with the war against Iran.
Indeed, and of course, we are moving on how to change our perspective to see how to ensure that there is, the situation is under control. But then if we want to look at the emergency meeting that was held by the United Nations Security Council, where we saw UN Chief Antonio Guterres actually urging ambassadors to act to ensure that they mitigate the risks so that there is no further susceptibility of the Middle East. And of course, he noted, which I said, that everything must be done to prevent further escalation. Now, from all that has been said, we will understand that it is difficult to probably put an end or come to a compromise, Steve, because of two aspects: interest and alignment. Let's take a case study. Should probably Iran align today with the US, or probably the leadership of Iran brings forth policies that are friendly to the US? Are we going to have this same argument today that the Washington, the leadership of the USA has presented and given reasons for choosing attack over diplomacy in trying to solve the antagonism between Israel and Iran?
First of all, I think Iran's priority as a government should be to create affinity with their own people. Whether they align with the U.S. or don't, they should align with what the will of their people want. And when the Ayatollah came in 1979, he came in with promises that women would continue to be afforded their rights, continue to be afforded their freedoms, and instead imposed the most vile, oppressive regime in history where women are executed for the crime of being raped, where women are executed for the crime of a wisp of hair showing from their burqa. The government of Iran should align with their people and give their people the choice to choose their future. Before I deal more with the diplomatic issue, let me deal with some of the comments that have been made by my colleagues. First of all, I agree with much of what Harley just said in terms of we're seeing a transition of perhaps the loss of that European power, particularly that of the United Kingdom, that have been this colonial global empire for so long, who are seeing their role diminished. And one of the reasons for the Board of Peace by President Trump is to expand those at the table to reflect modern issues of who has economic, political, and military power. Why is Japan? Why is India? Why are others on the sidelines while we continue to look at these European nations who are nations of the past rather than current or even as we look to the future? So I think we're seeing a transition, not just in terms of the Middle East, but I think globally. And he brought up the Ukraine-Russia conflict. I think that's also a great example of why diplomacy only works when you've got folks on both sides who are seeking a real resolution. We see in Ukraine that Zelensky and Ukraine have not moved one step from their demands to retake eastern Ukraine, to retake Crimea. You can't keep negotiating with someone who's not actually interested in getting to a resolution, whether as a lawyer on negotiating a contract, whether we're doing it diplomatically. If at some point diplomacy is not proceeding and it is right to walk from the table or realize that you're being gamed by your adversary. Let me also go back to some of the things that Enrique said. And I think that the savagery example he gave, I would point out to the savagery that is being imposed on Iranian women against their will. And I would agree that many of the countries in the European Union, in NATO, are not being treated as equal partners with the United States. But when you have countries like Spain and Portugal and others in NATO who are not paying the minimal 2.5% of their GDP share, when they're not funding their portion, you will not be an equal partner when you're getting a free ride or demanding of that within NATO and with the EU is one of the big stories that will certainly continue to attract and should attract our attention as we move forward. And then finally, let me go back to Achille talking about the number of missiles that Iran has. He is exactly right. They've got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of missiles. But as we've seen over just the last week, when you take out the launchers, they diminish their ability to strike their neighbors, including those that are not doing anything to them, including attacking sites that are civilian sites like airports and hotels. It's like if I have thousands of rounds of ammunition, but you take my gun away, I can throw bullets at you, but I can't shoot them at you. And we're seeing that while Iran was firing hundreds of missiles a day a week ago, now it's less than a handful a day because the launchers have been diminished. Their navy is at the bottom of most of the ocean. Their air power is diminished. You can't keep fighting when you may have missiles or bullets, but you cannot fire them. And I think that's what you're seeing, that this will not last years and years, as Achille pointed out. At some point, the ability of Iran to launch their weapons diminishes their ability to continue the fight.
Indeed, quite a complex situation there. And we have different interpretations as to what is happening. Then we want to understand the philosophy of military bases and the danger it actually poses to proxy nations. With you, Dr. Achille Eke, the Gulf rich countries we actually affected during the first retaliation from Iran after the attack from USA and Israel. And we want to look at the dangers of that, the presence of foreign military bases will always pose to proxy nations. And I think this is a timely topic because it actually affects the global world. We saw the United Arab Emirates, we saw Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and other countries actually being dragged into this just because they are harboring foreign military bases. What dynamics can we bring to this, and of course solving the problems of ensuring that proxy nations in the long run do not become entrapped or caught up in the web of antagonism between rivalry countries?
Well, if you really look at it carefully, Iran is not attacking those countries per se. They are attacking the military bases that are surrounding Iran and that are located in those countries. So and then also the military, the American interest in that region. So that's the most important focus of Iran. They're not interested in attacking Qatar people per se. No, they are attacking, for example, the most powerful radar system that they built in Qatar. It cost about $1 billion. They destroyed the different bases in Qatar, in Abu Dhabi, in all these surrounding countries. That's what they're aiming for, so that the U.S. cannot use those bases to attack them. So it's a very legitimate target. It's okay. But what we see here is that it's always that double standard, right? So, Steve mentioned that the U.S. has to free, they're looking to free women, Iranian women from the tyranny, from the barbarism, from all these, nasty, difficult words that they always use. But who is the one talking? The U.S. is talking. Really? Seriously? You have the right to talk? When we slaughtered thousands and thousands and millions of people here in the U.S., when you colonize those countries, who gave the U.S. the moral high ground to be lecturing people around the world? How many millions of people have you destroyed in Iraq, in all these wars? How many wars have the U.S. fought since 17-something? Over 400 wars? It's insane. Who gave you the right to be going out around the world and policing people? Who? Are you the right person to be really lecturing people around the world about how to, people have to manage their business affairs, their internal affairs? Really?
It's hard. As Harley pointed out, are we going to go back centuries or look at what's happening now?
No, it doesn't matter.
Are you seriously defending?
That is the problem.
Are you seriously defending the execution of women who are victims of rape for having been raped? So you were raped.
A country in this world where there is no execution of women or men or anything like that. Have you done it yourself? Have you done it?
Have I executed a woman for being raped? No, but Iran does. There was a 16-year-old girl who was executed and hung by her neck.
Have you killed
she was hung by her neck.
People? Have you killed babies in Iraq? Have you killed so many? How many people have you killed today? We talk about 20th century, 21st century. How many millions of people have U.S. killed with bombs everywhere? Look at Israel, look at Palestine, all these people. Are you discounting them? Are you discounting them because you want to protect? So now you're a defender of women in Iran? Really? You love Iranians so much that you're going to defend? It's absurd. Listen to what he says.
Let them free, Achille. I will not defend killing a woman for being raped. You can defend a woman, and you can defend the government.
You cannot meddle in their business, pretending to be, the person that anointed by God to be lecturing people around. Who are you? Who gave you that right?
You can defend the murder of a woman by a government. You can defend that. I will not.
You don't have the right to be bombing people around the world. You cannot. You don't have that right.
It has nothing to do with bombing people around the world.
Going around destroying countries. Look at what Libya has become today. Look at Libya. Libya was a very successful country, had no debt, didn't need anything from any organization like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. They were handling their business quietly. The CIA went in there and created, this myth that Gaddafi was going to destroy, or going to kill his people in Benghazi. So they had to figure. This is the same thing that they did in Ukraine. The same thing they tried to do in Iran the other day. It's the same crap that they're putting out there every day, every year. So it's the mindset that I'm talking about here. You don't have the right mindset to be lecturing people because your colonial mindset is still alive. You see, with Trump today, we're in the 21st century. We thought that colonial mindset would have been gone by today. No, it's still around. So that's what we're saying. No, you cannot keep thinking that, just like Dr. Royo said, we the white are the best. The other people are less than us. You know, that's the colonial mindset that is creating all that.
No, it is the Iranian mindset that says women are less.
Nobody's saying that you should
please,
if you hold on for a minute,
gentlemen.
Hold on for a minute. I just want to know if Enrique
I think we continue the conversation. The goal is actually for us to have a fertile place for discussion.
So I want to know if Enrique and Harley defend executing women for being raped.
I am not defending people who are slaughtering people around the world. I cannot defend the US for what they're doing. You don't have the moral high ground to be lecturing people. True, there are problems everywhere. Every country on this planet has problems, but you cannot go around bombing every country because they have problems. That's what I'm saying. So you want
by the way, let's get to the facts that when you say that Iran has not attacked other nations,
I am
they
saying
have attacked hotels and they have attacked the airport in Dubai. That is not a military target.
Oh,
so
look at
at least let's stay on the facts.
All right. So now you want to cherry pick. Yeah. That's what you do.
No, I'm calling out the facts, Enrique. You're not leading with the facts.
I'm talking about
gentlemen, just so we understand
at
that
least
the goal of our discussion today is not, of course, to say who is right and who is wrong, to bring the stakes on the table the way it is. Can we allow diplomacy to thrive over drones? Is it the right solution that we need today to solve to ensure that we mitigate escalations that are happening? And of course, Professor Dr. Enrique, it is imperative that we understand the place of communication or information diplomacy into the crisis in the Middle East. As a journalist, we are aware that, war doesn't start with the physical confrontation or even the exchange of missiles, but it starts with an idea and a plan, which is an information war that actually works on the mindset and, of course, puts the people's mind at war in order to bring narratives that will lead to the broader accomplishment of either personal interest as to the situation in the Middle East. How can we actually understand the information war that has either portrayed the USA as a peace crusader and Israel, and now portrayed Iran as an element that has to be controlled to ensure that it doesn't continue in its inhumane activities as being presented by the actors or other stakeholders in the sphere or the scope of the Middle East.
It's very interesting to point out one very interesting thing from this year and back from previous year. Yes, there are problems in Iran, there are problems with rights and so on, but anyway, they have at least elections and not a dynasty in the power, like the best ally of USA in Middle East, not talking on Israel, but Saudi Arabia. No problem with democracy when it's an absolute monarchy. No problem. No problem with one historical reason. British Empire used these terrible people of Saudi jihadists, of Saudi Wahhabists, for using like the best instrument for colonial policies in the Persian Gulf. Later, USA used these very people as the best partner in Middle East. Back in May 2025, there was a meeting in Riyadh, in the capital of Saudi Arabia, with Mr. Trump, with Mr. bin Salman, and with Mr. yes, you know, this beheader man from Syria. Yes, this person who in the first term of Trump, he was considered as terrorist, as leader of Al-Qaeda, and USA gave up to $10 million for his head, because he was a chief of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, interesting organization, a terrorist organization funded by Saudis, created by Saudis, led by Saudis. Mr. Bin Laden was a Saudi. He was allegedly the creator of the terrorist attack back in 2001 in New York and so on. But what? No problem with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the best petrodollar ally, but he is at the same time the founder of terrorist organizations in Middle East, and no elections, no problem with rights, because it's just absolute monarchy. Iran is at least an Islamic republic. By the way, like Pakistan. Pakistan is also another Islamic republic. But Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Emirates, United Arab Emirates, even Oman, they are, or Kuwait, they are absolute monarchies, but no problem with democracy, no problem with human rights, because they are our allies. So yes, wonderful point. By other side, in the case of NATO, remember that NATO was created in order to make the deterrent against USSR. No USSR in the map, but NATO continues. Why? Because it's not an alliance. It's the occupation of USA in Europe. It's the position of USA in European continent, as they had also in Middle East, in Southeast Asia. But these threats failed during Cold War, but the NATO keep the pace here. And yeah, of course, if for USA is so cheap, is so expensive, it's very easy. Take your baggage and going back home. We can create our European Defense Agreement, which USA always try to evade, because USA consider if Europeans defend themselves, we are going to be rejected from the continent. So no way. NATO is the alliance, is the bridgehead for USA in European continent. And USA created our conflict with Russia in Ukraine. This is the conflict of USA in Europe in order to attack one of the most important enemies for USA, Russia, in this case, for one side. And in Asia-Pacific, or the Indo-Pacific area, they are trying to push the same conflict between China and Taiwan. Yes, conflict creators, great cowboys. And unfortunately, dear colleagues, I have to go out because I have now one connection. So best wishes and thanks a lot for your invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Enrique, for your analysis. And of course, we continue to widen horizon to understand and to see at what level we have to advocate for a sustainable peace and strong negotiations or mediation that will, bring out or wipe out the ambiguity of stakes in the Middle East. We want to come, if we should align with the rationale that the US intervened because of the killing or the execution of women. We note that with you, Professor Jagdish Khatri, that during the 28th of February attack by USA and Israel, it actually touched a school, an all-girls school in Iran, and we recorded casualties were recorded in this school. So let's try to understand if the attack or physical attack is actually an absolute solution to solving the problem, which Steve in his own analysis just highlighted as to being the reason why the USA has to step in to probably stop Iran from killing women, according to his statement. Is that rationale strong enough to give reasons for the invading or the attacking of a sovereign a sovereign state?
There can be no rationale in attacking a sovereign state and killing the head of a state. There can be no rationale for killing innocent women and children and attack on schools and hospitals. No civilized society can justify it. But only thing is that we have to understand what is going to happen after the war. What are the results of the war? See, there are already things are pointing to some direction. While Iran will have more suffering in the form of loss of human lives and maybe property damages, it is certain they are suffering more and they will suffer more. But the loss of USA will be of much greater value in the form of economic loss due to the high cost of this war. As we see that Patriot and THAAD missile systems are being used to intercept and kill the Shahid drones, which are costing only $20,000, and you are using $10 million worth equipment to kill them. So that is one aspect. And already Iran is acting smartly by using cheaper drones so that the stockpile of interceptor missiles gets over early. And second loss will be the strategic loss especially to America, because as we see, there are reports that Gulf states are now worried, the allies of US. There are talks between UAE, Kuwait, Saudi, and Bahrain and Qatar that they should withhold their investments worth trillions of dollars that were under contract with US. So that is going to damage the US economy a lot. And moreover, there is a loss of reliability, that having a US base, army base in your country is a sort of protection. Now these Gulf states are being attacked, although we don't support that, but these Gulf states are being attacked just because they had army bases of US in their country. So these bases, rather than a protection, they are now turning in a liability to these Gulf states. And these Gulf states' position as the safe haven for tourism, for investment, and for all migrant workers, that has been shaken. So these are the after effects that will be more pronounced after the war is over.
In data, looking at the post-war era and how to navigate it in this present status quo, I will come back this time around to you, Steve. Let's look at, should we assume that the US, deserves the title of being the global police, or probably a peace crusader, having the prerogatives or the powers to invade a nation, especially a sovereign nation, probably ensure a leadership change with the rationales presented. Is the intervention in the Middle East actually bringing that solution, or is it destabilizing not just the Middle East, but Europe and even Asia, given the other stakeholders that have been implicated already in this onslaught that came as a result of failure to hold constructive negotiations, one that did not meet the interest of the parties on the table?
Well, again, I think it's too early to tell, when you get to a post-war and how you get to a post-war and who emerges as leaderships in that position. I do think, though, that again, diplomacy only works if you've got willing negotiators on both sides, and if you have one side that's not really interested in peace, one that is not really interested in stopping their development of nuclear weapons. Iran has acknowledged they have a lot of uranium that is not for power usage. Why do they have uranium that's for weaponization if they're not developing that? If you invite me into your home to prove you don't have weapons and say, oh, you can look in every closet except that one, that is not being honest. It is not being truthful. And again, that's what we've seen with the Iranian negotiators. Let me say also that Professor Khatri is exactly right. The economics of this are difficult. As he pointed out, you've got Iran increasingly using $20,000 drones that take $1 million missiles to shoot them down. You also have the problems within any of these territories of what is the value of a U.S. military base. And I would just warn our panelists and viewers, be careful what you ask for. Enrique was talking about, why is the U.S., in Spain and in these places in NATO? There is an increasing desire by many U.S. taxpayers to say, why are we still in Germany supporting their economy with our military bases and investment, 50 years after World War II? Why are we still in these places spending a lot of our money as taxpayers defending countries that should have the capacity to defend themselves? And if they're really worried about Russia, which they say can't beat Ukraine, but somehow is going to be in Berlin and Paris and London in a few weeks if we don't stop them at the line in Mariupol, why aren't they stepping up, spending their money, their manpower, their munitions to defend themselves? So again, I think there's an increasing question mark in the U.S. of whether NATO is worth the effort of the U.S. And when you talk about who can stand in and prevent these kinds of conflicts, what has the United Nations ever accomplished? We were told after World War II that the UN would help us have a global power that could facilitate peace and diplomacy and negotiate conflict resolution. The United Nations doesn't stop anything. President Trump has interceded in potential conflicts around the world. The United Nations has done nothing. And maybe it's time for them to close, and maybe the Board of Peace can replace them with actual results.
Thank you for that, Steve. And if I should align with what you said with you, Haile Schlanger, let's look at how the crisis in the Middle East is already posing some sort of a sovereignty strain. If we can highlight the position of NATO, we saw Spain's position and the reaction that came from Trump, and it seems sanctions and probably have been weaponized, and nations somehow are being forced into taking drastic decisions, not because they want to, but because of the fulfillment of the dictates or principles of the NATO alliance. Let's look at this sovereignty strain and how the crisis in the Middle East is actually exposing some of these constraints and the way forward.
Well, let's take the case of Ukraine again, because Steve brought that up, and I think it's worth looking at it. Mm-hmm. What should Europe do about Ukraine? Instead of militarizing, instead of spending money they don't have to build weapon systems to go to war against Russia, when Russia has no intention of invading Western Europe, why not put pressure on Ukraine to accept the peace terms that were worked out between the Ukrainians, the Russians, and the US? Now, that would seem to be an easy one. And it's cost hundreds of billions of dollars and probably more than 1.5 million Ukrainian lives. And the Europeans want to continue the war. So the problem you have in Europe is you have an unelected bureaucracy called the European Union and NATO, which is basically an arm of the military-industrial complex, that have reasons for continuing the conflict. when the people of Europe don't want it. I live here in Germany. Yesterday in Potsdam, where I live, as well as in Berlin and elsewhere, there were marches of school children against the draft that's being pushed by Chancellor Merz.
Yeah.
Why do they need a big army in Germany? Don't people remember what happened when Germany militarized in the last century? And so I'm proud to say my daughter took part in that demonstration. Now, if you look at these things, what was her argument? What fight do we have as children against Ukraine or Russia? Why can't there be an agreement based on principle? And if you go back and look at the reason we still have a war in Ukraine, it's because the United States initially, and Biden was in particular responsible for this, refused to negotiate with Putin about Russia's legitimate security concerns about NATO moving eastward. Now, we have a similar problem in terms of the Middle East. Why is Israel allowed to have evade the non-proliferation agreement? How come Israel isn't taken to task for the fact that they're hiding the fact that they have nuclear weapons? And the fact that they haven't used them yet, they didn't have to. They had military superiority and have killed large numbers of people on their borders, including in the occupied territories. So, we shouldn't look at which of these murders is more justified. What we have to look at is, why do states feel a compulsion to go to war? And in the West, we have a military-industrial complex that controls the intelligence community and the defense departments of governments. And that's where the wars come from, combined with bankers and corporate cartels that want cheap raw materials and cheap labor. And that's also something that people in Africa have to look at, because if you're going to ever have an end to colonialism in Africa, it's going to be when the Europeans are finally told, as they're being told in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, we don't want you to come in here to protect us. We don't need your damn protection.
Exactly.
To be able to develop our own internal economy. That's what the global South is saying. And that's what the British City of London don't want to hear. That's what Wall Street doesn't want to hear. And unfortunately, you have people in Frankfurt, in Brussels, who don't want to hear that either. They want to continue the colonial world. And so we're going to continue to have these wars that are essentially extensions of the colonial wars. And one final point here. If you talk about colonialism as a 500-year problem, 250 years ago, the United States adopted a Declaration of Independence, which has language which should be applied to every single country. That nations have rights, that people of nations have rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Why don't we celebrate that instead of celebrating the armed strength we have so that we can kill off a government, kill off a people that we don't like, and steal their resources? So my organization is fighting to use the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence to extend those ideas of sovereignty and freedom to every people in the world.
Indeed, of course, it is the will of the people that is center at this juncture. How authentic is this self-image as a peace or global peace guarantor, and of course of international law. According to reports, U.S. has vetoed about 50 plus UN resolutions on Israel dating 1972 to 2025, and of course, and this is how we continue to analyze how interest alignment and proxy tendencies always, counteract and even bring more questioning as to the relevance of the UN Security Council, or even the practicality of international standards or law governing the infringement, especially of sovereignty. Coming back to you, Dr. Eke, we are looking at the U.S. On a war spree, like a title actually underlined, and then we still look at, aspects of sanctions and probably secondary sanctions, and then more open, talks. Because if we're listening to Trump and his utterances, he's bent on removing the leadership in Iran. And of course, there are other aspects which the USA and Israel intend to attain in the Middle East. But then, aside this, there is always need to bring about analysis that will provide the scope for peace and sustainability, and trying to see how friendship or relationships or even diplomatic connections can come in, especially with the new dynamics of the world of multipolarity. What analysis, what take can you give her as per the ambiguity or even the blasphemy between, peace guarantor invading and overlooking systematic diplomatic moves?
Well, I think the dog doesn't change the way it sits now, right? So it's a translation from French, but I don't know if it's the correct way. But that's not going to change, right? And we shouldn't be expecting that to change. The only thing that's going to force them, the U.S. and its allies who are, with that colonial mindset to change, is what is happening now today with the BRICS and the de-dollarization. I believe what is happening today is the result of that pressure that they're feeling about de-dollarization. That is the core of what is happening today that we're not talking about, because these are what we see a manifestation from the dying lion, that he's about to pass out, and he can't pass out quietly. So you got to create a lot of troubles around himself. So what I see is that the dollarization, the BRICS, got together, and then they're doing business amongst themselves without using the US dollar. If you look at Venezuela, you look at Iran, you look at all these BRICS countries that are commercing, doing business without the dollar. That is scaring the heck out of Washington today, and that is the reason, the profound reason why they're trying to get control of all these oil countries, so that they can go back to, having the dollar as the primary currency for purchasing of oil and goods. So that's going to help, the U.S. debt, which is currently at $38 trillion, to be able to be manageable for them. So with the current situation where we see China is selling its bonds. Japan is about to do the same thing. They're going to sell, I think, $700 billion of U.S. Treasury debt, so that they can use that money to sustain the economy. With what's going on with this current situation now. So we see that is the main important reason that we haven't talked about here today. And I'm here with Dr. Shilanga. If he wants to chime in and add more to what I'm saying, please feel free. This is a debate. Feel free to add anything that you want to add to that, because I believe that is the underlying issue that we have not been talking about. Mm-hmm. And attacking Iran. Why are they attacking Iran today? Why is it necessary to do that? Because Iran is a member of BRICS, and they are selling their oil in their own currency, just like Venezuela was doing. And so they have decided at the White House that they have to take those countries, take those countries' resources in their hands so they can control that. If you look at it at the base, it's oil. And today, the Secretary of Treasury mentioned that they are going to, remove some of the sanctions that they've put to Russia, especially when it comes to oil, so they can sell more oil, so that the market doesn't go crazy, so that they can manage the situation, as it stands right now. And that was an interview that he did today, I believe, or yesterday. So we see that they are very scared of what's going to happen in terms of oil. especially if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, oh my goodness, that's even worse. And so they're looking for all kind of ways to put out the fire that they created, that they were told it was going to happen. They didn't believe it. That's the thing. They were told, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. So you want to say something, Harley?
Yeah, look, I agree with you. And I think this is what I was talking about, the end of colonialism, the end of an imperial era.
Mm-hmm.
That the British and the United States are not willing to accept that.
Yes.
And they're at the heart of the war against Russia and Ukraine. They're carrying out the war against Iran. And they're the attack on Venezuela, the attack on China. We're seeing a new order coming into existence. And that's what this is really about. It's not about protecting the women of Iran, just as the Ukraine war is not about protecting democracy in Ukraine because
Exactly.
you have an elected president there.
Exactly.
So either we fight for the ideas of multipolarity and a harmony among nations, or this is going to get worse.
Exactly.
And so I absolutely agree with you, and I hope that you got that from what I was saying in my comments today.
I did. I got it, but I wanted to go very, very deep to be more specific, so that our listeners can better understand what you meant. But yeah, I don't know why Steve disappeared without any notice, but it would have been good for him to when we have this conversation, we may disagree, but it's not personal. It's because we want to give the best information for our listeners so they can have arguments, and so that if tomorrow they get into those situations where they're in power, they know what to do. And last, I want to go I want to look at it from the African perspective, right? So Africans should read this war as a warning, like I said earlier in my original statement. When great powers fight, Africa pays the price unless it has its own security and economic power, right? So there are three core lessons that we need to learn here. The first one is don't outsource your security, okay? The second is build resilience and not dependency. And we see that what happened, we see that with Iran. And third, use collective political voice. That is the three ingredients that Africa has to use. So
Absolutely.
For the first one, don't outsource security. We look at the Iran war shows how quickly foreign bases and security partnerships, in quote, can drag entire regions into conflict they did not choose. And that is a disaster. And then when we look at African commentators who are already warning that we must refuse becoming staging grounds for proxy battlefields for US, Israeli, Iranian, Russian, and Chinese agendas, which is right. We can work with them, but we shouldn't outsource our security to them, to any of these countries, whether it's Russia or China or anybody. We should be able to do like Iran is doing, have your own system in place to protect yourself. So, and then we talk about building resilience. The African Union itself, for example, warned that this war can threaten energy markets, which is already happening, and food security and economic resilience, is necessary for Africa because we are heavily exposed to imported fuels, wheat, and external finance, which is very dangerous for us. And then in terms of collective voice, the African position so far has been very mixed, to say the least. Some governments have issued generic calls for restraint. Others quietly are aligning with Washington and the Gulf monarchies, and some of them, and a few, are clearly denouncing the U.S.-Israeli strikes as aggression, which it is. And so many analysts, argue that Africa must stop, what's called false neutrality, right? So, we've seen that false neutrality equates aggressors and victims alike, and instead, Africans should be using the African Union, for what it is, and the BRICS platform that exists currently to defend international law consistently, because the same legal troubles, or security troubles or standards that we've seen in Palestine and in Iran, can be used against African state tomorrow, which is already, verge of happening. So
Absolutely,
thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eki. We round off with you, Professor Jagdish. I was actually coming to the BRICS position. According to some pundit, the BRICS Plus alliance did not respond as they would have wanted, probably with some sort of physical confrontation as in favor of Iran. But then we want to understand the other aspects of alliances that promote some sort of intelligence support rather than physical confrontation, that will still see the human fabric being vulnerable or susceptible at especially with the case of the Middle East.
Well, as India has always promoted, therefore, the solution of any conflict, it lies in 3 Ds: de-escalation, dialogue, and diplomacy. And as President Lula da Silva of Brazil recently gave a statement that democracy is not a sign of diplomacy is not a sign of weakness. It is the expression of highest form of human intelligence, and that is what must be tried by all nations to solve any conflict. As far as BRICS is concerned, BRICS is not a military alliance, and there is no agreement that it is a defense deal. So BRICS has been mostly a political and economic sort of combination where people support, the nations support each other for mutual trade and on the international platforms. So military intervention cannot be expected from them. But yes, there are reports that Russia and China, they are providing some intelligence to Iran in this conflict.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Jagdish. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of today's edition of Global Insight. Just to note, as Pundit have always said it, there will be different ways to actually retaliate the world of multipolarity and some sort of the events in the Middle East, like as Dr. Eki highlighted, is one of those tactics that is being probably used to bring forth argument that the multipolar society is just an illusion. So on this note, we are going to draw the curtains into today's edition of the program while enjoying the voices of our guests for today to be able to understand the real stakes of the Middle East, and of course stand on the path that protect humanity and society, and the path that gives more importance to the principles of international relations and cooperation. Without much to say again, I will draw the curtains into today's edition of the program while wishing you a wonderful weekend as we continue to watch events unfolding in the Middle East and elsewhere across the globe. Bye-bye.
This program is brought to
Thank
you
you.
by
Thank
Globus.
you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Hello. Bye.
Bye.